Today I'm talking about one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Let's... Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. wrapped up this past summer. It's 2020 with season 7, one of my favorite shows of all time. And I highly recommend to everybody. I think it's, you can get it on Netflix. Obviously you can buy it. It's, I think, $20 a season or something like that. And it just has as a Marvel fan, it obviously has a lot of great pieces of the puzzle over the years, especially about the Inhumans, and some about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. too. But really, it's just about the character development and watching them work together as a team. So this video, I'm going to have, tons and tons of spoilers. So I'm going to talk about the season. I'm going to talk about, obviously, some speculation on what we think might happen. I'm going to talk about some comics. So I will put some timestamps in the description below. But if you haven't watched the seasons or you want to, see some of them, definitely you probably want to pause it here and come back. But if you don't care and you just want to know stuff, then you're in the right place.
What does S.H.I.E.L.D. stand for, Agent Ward?
Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division.
And what does that mean to you?
It means someone really wanted our initials to spell out S.H.I.E.L.D.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Started in 2013, really after the first Avengers. And it slowly evolved. Obviously, I think a TV show does. It's ran 7 seasons all the way to 2020. So 7 years, it's a good run. And I think, there, at the time I was told there was 2 different divisions of Marvel. There was the MCU run by Kevin Feige and Marvel TV run by a different guy. I can't remember his name. And so I think the TV series would be, some of the stuff we saw on Netflix, with Daredevil and Punisher, and obviously Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. run on ABC, so it's prime time. It did get moved around a little bit throughout the years, but I think, it had a good run, and some interesting things happened along the way where they canceled it, but then they brought people back. But, overall, I think they've had a pretty healthy, I think they might have started out with 8 or 10 million people probably after the popularity of the first Avengers movie, and then it kind of dwindled off. But I think they did have a core group of, 2 or 3 million viewers in the end, and that's why they're able to keep it going. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of each of the seasons and then talk about some of the main characters. So in season 1, really you see the team being built. You see kind of how Phil came back to life. And seasons 1 and 2, and I think 3, they do try to follow the movies. So one of the most interesting parts of season 1 is that 3/4 of the way through the movie, Winter Soldier hit in the theaters, and you get to see Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. really fall apart because they find out that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been infiltrated by Hydra, just like in the movies, and you see some of the pacing, and it's really, really awesome. I think that's some of the best episodes that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did. Was late season 1. Season 2 is a lot about their fight against Hydra. Obviously, they find out that Hydra is infiltrated, and they're trying to fight back. Season 3, you see a lot of Inhumans. They're constantly looking for kind of weird, odd anomalies, and you find that there's multiple humans around the world that through this different compound that they find can be basically turned into superheroes, which follows the comics, as you know. Season 4 is interesting. They introduce this mystical item called the Darkhold, and Ghost Rider appears. And that's a really awesome, it's like the first half of the season, and it's really the best Ghost Rider we've seen on screen, in my opinion. It's Robbie Reyes. It's really enjoyable. And he's got an edge. He's kind of a good guy, kind of a bad guy. I think they do a good job with him. The second half of that season, they really push hard into LMDs, and they kind of create the situation really like the Matrix, where they pull everybody into this different world, and they're fighting for their lives. another good set. I think it's about 12 episodes that runs. Season 5, just when they finish beating the framework, then they come back and get teleported into the future and find out the Earth has been blown to pieces, and they've got to work their way backwards and save it. And that season's really, really good. And that was when they were announcing at the end of that one that was it. They were going to be done. And it's kind of interesting because at the end of that season, the last episode is actually called The End, and you get to see some wrap up with some of the characters. And to a certain degree, they even walk off into the sunset. But then they announced they were going to do 2 more seasons. So they, had to come up with something, and they did. So seasons 6 and 7, which are really half seasons, they're only like 12 episodes each, which I actually thought was good. The original ones were 22 episodes, and sometimes you get an episode here where it's kind of a filler episode. You may, if you know what I'm talking about. But when they only have 12 episodes, they really move, and maybe you get a bad one, but for the most part, they're all pretty good. So season 6, they fight this alien kind of that's coming in. They bring back Phil again because he's died, and you get to he's from another dimension, and you learn about that, and that's really fun. They just do fun stuff with that. And then season 7, the final season, they once again have to save the world, but this is kind of more of a time travel thing. They end up going back in time, and they're skipping ahead. So I think they go back into the 20s, and then each episode they're skipping forward. So they go to the 20s, the 40s, the 50s, the 80s, and you get to see the costume changes, and there's fun callbacks, and they do funny things with that seriously just call right back to like Terminator or just different various Blade Runner. This funny thing, right? There's a line right out of Blade Runner. So they do a lot of fun stuff throughout the show, and yet you see, and especially in that one, you get to see a lot of the different characters that were from earlier seasons because they're coming back through time, and so they intentionally did that, I think. So, and that was the last season's a very fun season too. The show itself really is built around his team, and in a lot of ways, it feels kind of like Star Trek in a little ways, maybe more like the Next Generation, where you have these set characters, Picard, Riker, etc. That's really what they settle in on, the characters the last maybe 3 or 4 seasons, and they carry those characters. There are new ones that are introduced, but those are the core characters that you really fall in love with. And they're kind of fighting, obviously always to save the world, but working their way through various, obstacles and enemies, etc. And so let me just talk about the first season, because really that's the one that set the tone. I really think the first season, I'd say almost 4, 5, 6 episodes, they're kind of dumb. They're what you expect. They're almost like X-Files, where the team is just put together, and they're going out and they're finding different alien anomalies, and they kind of pull together some, and you see, different plot lines might come together, but it isn't really till maybe episode, I'd say 7 or 8, I can't quite remember, but when you start to see the influence of Hydra, that it really pulls together. And then when they find out that Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., it really kicks the show off. And I think, and I can't remember, but it might be like episode 7 or 8, you find out one of the agents is Hydra that's on a team, and they even said the actor didn't know, so they had to pull him to the side right before they filmed that one and said, hey, you're actually a Hydra. And so that's a huge twist in the show. And then they pull in Bill Paxton. I mean, the late Bill Paxton, who's great. I mean, who doesn't love him as an actor, from Twister to Aliens, etc. And they have a lot of actors that they pull in that are big time actors, like Edward James Olmos from, he has a huge career, obviously, maybe from science fiction, Battlestar Galactica. He obviously was the main star in that awesome TV show. If you want to watch that one, that's another good one. And so they have a number of stars along the way that they pull in, and but what they don't do, interestingly enough, is they don't pull from the MCU, and that might be mainly because of this kind of weird. There's 2 different companies, the Marvel TV and the MCU, At one point, you see Samuel Jackson, and that's in season 1. And then in season 2, you can see that they are pulling away from the MCU. And then by season 3, 4, they're just like, we don't even think we're ever going to be associated with the MCU. They hardly even mention it at all. But funny, that's really when the show, I think, finds its legs and starts really moving forward. When they're like, we don't have to, we don't have to play along with that timeline at all. Let's just do our thing. And really, that's when you get some of the best episodes. Drink some coffee here. Like that Bueller channel. He's great. He always is drinking his coffee or whatever. He loves his coffee. So let me talk specifically about some of the characters and some of the specs. So the main character is obviously Phil Coulson. You see him in Avengers, like I said, and he died, and then he comes back to life. They kind of explain it through some injection of crazy alien blood, and then that causes him to go crazy. Then he eventually dies again, and then he eventually dies again. And by the season 7, he has this great line where they're gonna kill him, and by then he's like a robot. They've uploaded his consciousness into a robot, and they kill him again. And so the bad guy is like, I'm gonna kill you, and he's like, I've died quite a few times. That's kind of like my superpower. So it's kind of funny. They just embrace the fact that he dies a lot. So his right-hand person that he relies on a lot, and as kind of his love interest, is this woman named Melinda May. And she's great. She's kind of a tactical, almost Black Widow style, kind of do it all. She's a pilot also, character. And then they have the 2 scientists, Jenna Simmons and Leopold Fitz, who also are involved and end up getting married, and that's a whole great piece of the show too. And there are great characters that they're kind of like, and I don't want to, because they're better in a lot of ways, they're better than this character, but they're kind of like the Scotty from Star Trek, right? They're the brains. They're always figuring out different ways to figure out and use technology to help out, and they have some really cool technology pieces. And now I'm talking more not necessarily about the original series, the original team, but then what it ends up the last, really, I'd say 3-4 seasons. You have the Inhuman. She's a speedster. She can go super fast. Yo-Yo Rodriguez. You have Mac, who ends up being the director of Shield. Sorry, lots of spoilers, like I said, because Coulson ends up giving up being director, which is interesting. You get to see Coulson get promoted to director because Fury promotes him to director of Shield, and then he ends up giving it up to Mac, which is super interesting, and he takes over, and that's another great plot line. And of course, the big character, which is this computer hacker that they employ right in the very first season and the first episode, and her name is Sky, and she ends up, and it's great, you don't know who she ends up being, but she ends up becoming, and you find out that she's Daisy Johnson, which of course ends up being the Inhuman Quake, and she has these superpowers to do vibrations and really is one of the strongest characters in the show, because you get to see her right in the beginning. She's kind of an orphan. She doesn't know what she is, and she ends up being the super strong, obviously super strong superpowers, with super strong characters throughout the show. In terms of speculation for comics, I'll show you a couple of these here that I have, which, the show is dead and gone. I don't really know how much these comics are going to be worth. They're $10, $20, $30 comics. Some of them are a little bit rare because of the print run. I'm sure they're hard to find, but it is really these, I think initially, like I said, 8 million, and now you got 2 million people that are kind of diehard fans that these comics might be meaningful to. I think they'll probably bring the show to Disney Plus. Disney Plus is obviously looking for, content. And so once it runs out, or whatever licenses they have, I think it's on Netflix right now, they're going to bring it over. The question that I think is interesting is, the first person is obviously Daisy Johnson, Quake. And the reason why I think they're going to push her into the MCU. So in the end, the season 7, she's taken over her own unit, and they've kind of flying. They've outfitted one of their um, ships that can fly in space, and a lot of the stuff that happens in the last 3-4 seasons is in space. So that's kind of interesting. They fight this robot group called the Chromicrons, and so that's a big part of the last 2 seasons. So, but she's just kind of on her own, and she flies out. I think that she might have a couple other agents with her, but not the core agents. All the core agents stay on Earth, and she kind of flies off. So where she go, we don't know. We know that in the last MCU movie, Fury was also in space. So is there a connection there? I don't know. Literally, I think in the last day or two, I think they announced, and it was from Variety, so a relatively good source, that they're going to do a Fury television show on Disney Plus. Is that going to be a Agents of S.W.O.R.D.? Is that going to be a Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? He doesn't really run S.H.I.E.L.D., but yet he runs S.H.I.E.L.D. And I just feel like, well, and once again, I don't know if is Samuel Jackson going to show up for 22 or 8. I guess like the Disney Plus shows are only like 8 or 9 shows, so maybe he'd be willing to do that. Is he gonna be in every episode? And I don't know. I feel like they're obviously gonna have to have other characters, and they've invested 7 years and told a great story on how Quake came to be. We know it's a huge investment to take a character from scratch and introduce that person to the world. Can they push Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. hard so people, or make the character show up in the MCU, and then that would trigger people to say, I'm going to go back and watch some of these Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. shows so I can see her origin there. I think that's a possibility. So they have an actress. She's great. She has a following. She does a great job, and they don't have to, boot her from ground zero. In fact, really, it's interesting. The Inhumans are such a big piece. I mean, Ms. Marvel is an Inhuman. So are they going to tell that story? Yes, I think they are. Are they going to completely reboot it from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Maybe. But there are holes in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. of how and why they hint at them, but there definitely could be something that fleshes them out. Obviously, there's huge Inhuman characters, Black Bolt, etc., that they could and probably want to bring to the MCU. There's mutants too, which obviously are different than Inhumans. How does that play into it? I feel like Inhumans is more of a TV thing, but obviously they did make that Inhumans movie, so I don't know. They had plans there, and it didn't work out. But Daisy Johnson feels like a person who could make the jump. They could bring back Agent Coulson, and when people didn't understand why, they could probably point to the show, but they probably have to explain it some. Maybe he's done. Maybe they're not. That'd be too confusing for the movie audience, because you can't necessarily depend that the movie audience is going to go watch the shows, but there's it's all getting mixed up together. You've got, with Disney Plus, you've got major actors, obviously, as WandaVision, a bunch of the other shows, Falcon and Winter, where the shows and the movies, and they're all just trying to tell different stories. So I think Daisy Johnson makes the jump. The question is what about some of the other ones? Someone had mentioned, I've read that the Darkhold, which is this book that kind of bridges the gap between some of the dark characters, does that make the jump? That was some of the pieces with Ghost Rider. Maybe Ghost Rider was Robbie Reyes, was really, really good. He was only in like maybe 5 to 6 episodes. It's awesome to see him with all of his powers. They did a relatively good job of explaining some of it. The actor was great. He was really good. Do they bring him back? I hope. They had planned to bring him, I think, to Hulu. I can't remember. So that's another one. I did spec on a bunch of the Robbie Reyes stuff back in the day. It really didn't have the pop you would think, and he was great in the show. So I think from a speculation perspective, you definitely have to consider that these TV shows don't, well, once again, Disney Plus is something else, don't give the pop that a movie does. That's what I think we've seen so far. But you never know. I mean, look at The Mandalorian, what it's done to some of those Star Wars comics. I mean, it's blowing them up. But so you don't know. I think it's clearly when it was on ABC, you know, it gave it a little bit of a pop, but not much, and it didn't, those things haven't held. So I think that's about it. I'm specking on a lot of different Daisy Johnson. You've seen those covers that I've shown them here, and I think that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will, in some way, shape, or form, come to Disney Plus, and maybe it is this Fury show ends up what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is, and I'm sure that they're going to pull in characters from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, I would not be surprised to see any of these characters, like I mentioned, Melinda May, etc., end up being in Fury, the Fury TV show. Hopefully they are. They're great characters, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Have a great day.